So the principle of karma is something more like universal. It's unanimously accepted by all kinds of philosophy or schools, except nihilist or nihilist. I don't know, in Sanskrit, it's like there's one school from the non-Buddhist side, which is called nihilist or nihilist. So this school never accepts karma. Otherwise, the principle of karma is unanimously or commonly accepted by all kinds of philosophies of schools. So, in a very common ground, it's very understandable that it's very beneficial to all the human beings, and it's very necessary for all human beings, and also it's very beneficial for all if we practice that. So when we talk about the small scope, so we never just think that it's very kind of small practice. It's very important. It's a stepping stone. It's a foundation where you start to practice. So that's why it's very important to start from the small scope. So the teaching of karma is something like there's no end. It's far and wide. So if you look on the karma and you take the ages, that's why. So this is the summary of karmas. So when we try to take the wall or precept of 10 known virtues, or we, in a sense that we are able to always concentrate on the 10 known virtues, and we are able to eliminate the 10 known virtues, then which is categorized in Sutrayana, Tantrayana, and all yanas. And those who happen to take a precept or whatever, who are the laws and precepts, and it's very important and necessary to stick on the 10 virtues. So once who take the precept and who is unable to preserve the precept, and then is sure that, and there is a consequences, and he have to pay the, you can say, and he have to face the result. So if you are able to preserve the precept, then it's very beneficial to yourself as well as to others. So once you have already taken the precept and you are unable to preserve or to keep the precept alive, then it's quite dangerous. Because it may fall down due to the hell realms. May. Not just may. So once you fall down the hell realms, so when we talk about the hell, sufferings of hell, then you will hard to believe, hard to accept, because it's beyond our mind.
수명감, 중감, 영감, 감수마야 하도가 대화집에서는 드림전화 청년다서 즉 대화 두자시는 두자식 드림전식 말에 대화 실력을 나갔어. 야래 대화 실력을 나갔어.
And this is the power and the fruits if we do engage in the negativity. And as well as there's the brighter side of, you can say, when you preserve the precept, there's also a brighter side. Like, there are three different kinds of virtues: great virtue, middle virtue, and lesser virtue. So according to the way of you preserving the precept, and there is the result. So according to that, there's three different kinds of there are three different kinds of elements, and three different kinds of elements. No.
마찬가지로 다방으로 하는 연습을 동행되는 아파트 그 모셔봤지. 이게 야는 겁나 지다게 다 간단 지다 가서 이렇게 때문에 일단도 쓰고 얘나 그냥 야는 지다를 보여 하고 너도 잠들 줄을 야 거라 동안은 지다 너무 동안은 지다 지다 가서 있게는 잠들 줄이 세 가지.
So when we talk about the refuge, and the more you get a fearness about the sufferings, and the more you really encourage yourself to do refuge. So that's why the most important practice to do refuge is to generate a fear within yourself. Fear in the sense that we have a meaningful fear, that you really get a fear of samsara and this kind of disease. So when you get the fear of that, then you will be able to do the refuge. So once you have a fear inside, and we say that it's the one seat of where you practice refuge.
지다 지어가지고 너무 동원들에 내가 동원 처리도 되게 마셔요. 동원 처리 저것은 지다 심어도 이거 잠도 보였다고 이거. 잠도 보였다고 이거 가서면 그런 것도 좀 싫어요. 거라면 좀 지어서 그것도 싫어요. 그것도 마시나 그걸 담는 거 지금 말하라. 제가 여성 동원 마셔나 여성 동원을 담고 이거 중요한 중요한 거 말이에요. 그거 동원 마셔나 기본적인 내용인 거 말이에요. 선지고 동원 마셔나 이거 진범 내용.
So likewise, I mentioned you before, to away from like a lower realm, it's very important for you to understand the sufferings which were suffered by the lower sentient beings. So once you get the understanding of the lower sentient beings suffering, then it automatically comes a fearness in within you, and through that fearness, and you will definitely you will rely on some kind of refuge, or you have to rely on somebody that who can help you to away from this kind of, sufferings. So this is how you can the practice of the small scope person. And in other way, to away from samsara, it's very important to talk about, or to talk about, you can say, the sufferings of samsara. Until or unless you didn't understand the suffering of samsara, and you didn't get the total understanding part of the middle way scope. So middle way scope is always totally related with, you can say, samsara. One who is always practiced to only oneself, to away from samsara, that is called in the middle scope. So, and likewise, so to understand the greater scope, person's understanding, greater scope is very important for you to understand the sufferings of all sentient beings. Until unless you didn't understand the sufferings of all mother sentient beings, and you will unable to practice the greater scope.
저 동물이 겁나 교산 여러 봐. 여러 동물 겁데 단독으로 잠도세 먼저 삼매고 막 도로 봐. 거기 동물 삼삼삼도 동물 삼대가 때네. 동물 거 님을 때네 다가 고만 여러 봐. 심지 그 동물 공공공을 따라지 심지 좀더 고만 여러 봐. 동물 공매다가 교산 친구 여었어.
So why I'm keep on saying all those things? Because it has its own benefits. If you like from your heart, from the depth of your heart, if you meditate on the suffering which was suffered by lower realm beings, and what will be the result? The result will be you will born in the upper realm. And also once you meditate on the sufferings and the difficulties which are faced by, you can say, samsaric beings, the result will be liberation. And once you meditate on the, you can say, suffering and the difficulties of all the mother sentient beings, the result will be enlightenment. So there is a, you can say, benefit if you meditate on all those things.
그리고 교사면은 동행원도 동정하러 봐. 동료를 그 교대는 그 교사를 열어. 민중들 남으러 봐. 들어 때문에 나오는 거 도저히 도와요.
So if we meditate on this kind of things, if there's no benefit, then there's no point. Because we found and we know that there is a benefit, that's why we do practice. We do practice on these particular areas like hell realm, you can say lower realm, samsara, and sentient beings. So the most important is most important is to generate the renunciation. To renounce from this kind of thing, and then you will get the result.
더 관심 때문에 간다 고려대화 잠자나. 고려대화 최소도 단지된 콜레지에 잡아다는 누군가라고 가서 라원주 친구다. 상받아 계신다. 또다 비슷 고려대화는 또 제가 전화 봐. 하다 메고 마테로 또도 송제 대다가 토야가 셔도 되는 거 지원주 주는 잠들 렌저 송아들 때니 갑들 때니 와가도 메고 막 토쇼데 토쇼데 콜레지에 잡아다 상받아 계신다. 된저가 토야가 셔도 되는 거 지원주 주는 당 와점들 렌저 송아들 때니 토라도 대장 저는 인게 들려다 기부 타마시에서 고려다와 잠다나 라뉴도 니에서 기부터 타마시에서 제가만 하는 당장에 진짜다 기부터 수분단에 타마들 뜻이니까 뭐 기부터 뭐 뜻이죠.
So what is the definition of small scope person? The definition of the small scope person is that the one who always engage and try to practice the most perfect pleasure of the world. And they consider that the perfect happiness from the worldly aspect, and they're concerned that then you happen to be reborn as a universal king, or Brahma, or Indra, is the highest target from the point of, we can say, small scope person. So they considered like to be born as a universal king, to be born as a Brahma, to be born as an Indra, Shiva, whatever. And these are the you can say, most perfect happiness from the aspect of small scope person.
세단도 천대 대화라 마사바세 하고서 천대를 당 천대를 대화라 마사바세 이제 치마나 하다면 고마도야가 수도 된매고 주고 주름 송 대점을 내서 송은 남들아 되니 대담을 기본심을 하다면 고마 좀 부르다도 없이는 생각이 기본 다견에 담아들 해서 근데 선대 나 마셔볼 줄 몰라요. 무슨원에
세티고로 뇌동으로
알려줘.
기부팅 말해
가서야 가서를 내려가라.
기부팅 담아들어디
기부충으로 생들이 자는 쉬어 말아.
So the practice of the, you can say, small scope person is that one who is not attached to this very lifetime and one who is always keep on preserving the precepts of 10 non-virtues, 10 virtues, who abandon the 10 non-virtues and who always try to get the perfect happiness from this, from this world and who always to try to get the perfect happiness of this world from the, you can say, like target, like universal king and so forth. And this is the scope of small scope person.
이내 내가 기부충은 정말 좋아 말아. 기부는데 기부충은 통을 받아서 기부는데 통을 받아서 기부충을 하는 게 봐. 이내 대삼 던던 것들이 기부 담아들이. 맞아다 대삼 비고요 말아. 이내 센디 라 마셔받은 게 담고 센들로 담아서 담고 그 중요한 토네 타담이 공방 받아 보여줄 하도 공방도 탑탑도 가지고 숨고 말았을 통을 하면 좀 기본 전례 코알은 나서는 이쪽으로 들어갔던 대담이 통을 하면 좋아마도 통만이 왜라면 죽어야 말. 기본 중무도 통을 넣자. 기본도 통을 넣자. 기본 심벌이 안 가야나. 통을 하면 내 숨면 해야 통을 연구이나 뭐다는 뭐 숨이야 연구이나 미식 마스터 페라데 미식 아니고 맞대 미식에 가면 숨이나 내 숨벌이 맨에야 페가 돌아가면 뭐 통을 하는 거야. 하더니 아니고 봐도 내야 제가 내 아니고 봐도 미니 통을 하는 거야. 하더니 아니 미식이면 통을 받아서 그래서 통을 하면 쓰게 되다. 인도도 미리 숨이는 찍니다. 지금 야세 지금 마스터 대회는 인도를 받아 통을 하는 지금 중국도 침몰도 보이나 중국은 뭐도 먹어. 다 되네 지금 중국 때문에 저기면 심해도면 다 내야로. 무슨이나 단지들의 기본 기본 되네 세상 다 내야도. 지금 침몰도 걸어 봐. 어떻게 봐지 통화하려. 그러니까 누가 지금 침몰도 되는 거 같이.
So likewise for us, and we are supposed to be the human beings that who really want to reach until the, you can say, greatest God person. So first, it's very important for us to follow the small scope person in the life, the path of the small scope. For example, we can take the example of 3 different kind of people, that 3 different kind of person that who are walking from the nunnery. They are starting from the nunnery, and within these 3 person, the one of them just want to come just somewhere around there, and until up to his like destination. But they come all together up there. So one already stayed there. And the two of the other persons say, come up. And for the while, after a while, the one person will say that, oh, this is my destination. He stayed there. So they come up 1, 2 up, until unless they reach the Kupani, like that. So the one who is happened to be follow the path of greater scope, but he has to follow the small scope path. That's what we are saying. So that's why there's no difference at all. There's no, you can say, we never give any importance to the small, you can say, lesser scope or small scope persons, because it's a foundation where you start all your practices. So likewise, I told you before the example of these 3 persons. The greater scope person, the one human being is that from the nunnery, he want to come here, but he has to take the whole other path. Otherwise, he can't jump, like he has to follow the path step by step. That's why we are saying that the practice of the small scope is very important. The main practice of small scope is to remove, you can say, to give up the attachment of oneself.
다 지고 중은 승이 있다. 또 신사. 다 기본 정의 승이잖아. 기본 정의들이 양 숨도 스베테베 잡초신 디벨레란 도바니 간시라니 랑시 삼tun이 지고티는 정시사 아스마 신세원도 스베테와 수상당 란조 하다메 이게단 스베테와라 이게다 수메제는 가서다 무시했다네 무시님 주고 대화요래 소송을 그라 수메라 근데 가서다 스베테와 수상 스베테와다 소송메다 소송을 하다 미 대화요라 봐 어때서리 아닌다 주네 맞춰봤지는 스베테와라요 그냥 하이 간조 론조 라양 란조 니지 가서다 나도 주고 맞주고 있는 야살하고 말아. 실로지 거래. 주고 맞주고선 클래스 주고서는 주고 야사도 말아. 어떻게 인가 하이 벤저도 대화라야 아니 배 저봐 들려야 하는 가서다. 실로지 실로지 하다 거기 들어가서 냐외 동네라. 무슨 고고는 냐와 교학은 세지만 많이와 노인사 하이 대화도 단도 들려야 하는 배 ningume material. Ay tevat ningume kansna po kewa sama yiga zo tenema nyawa jemane tim chimbo de jela tilla warwa. Ay tevala yidin güne mes kowa penjol yidin güne meme. Ama wata da dungi rashi yimbala yani iti sibe tewa jab chok shinisa watere. Hada mi tevala yani be shilo kini jab chok shinisa tambodu se.
So the definition of the middle scope person is that and there are three different kinds of definitions. The first one is that, and they have such a understanding and such a mind is that just for the normal person's happiness, he never attached to normal persons, just ordinary persons, happiness. But even, and he's not attached to the happiness which are used to get those up to the, pinnacle existence, peak of the existence. From this samsara to the peak of the existence, they have a different kind of happiness to the form and the formless realm. They never attach to the happiness of the form and the formless realm. They just think that this is something like once you do omit, and it's not, fit to eat once again. We just throw it, so dirty. So that's why they think that their happiness is something like that. Because when they finish the karma, when they exhaust the karma to be born in form and formless rhythm, they have to go down. It's not always there. So that's why they say that there is no definite for the happiness which are enjoyed by those form and formless rhythm, and there's not also definite the form that I have. It may just go tomorrow. I mean, right now, it's really indefinite. So that's why they never attach to the happiness enjoyed by from the lowest ordinary being to the pinnacle existence.
나도 집에 대화도 저반도 저기 대화를 곧 대화를 마셔 저기 저반도 저기 동아리 마셔 대화 말아와 대화로다 그래서 컨선 동안에 이해하는 저 동안 기회 저반도 저기 동안 순간 되는 거 알아봐 집에 대화도 저반도 저기 동아리요 저반도 저기 동아리를 나가게 맞춘 거 타바도 이해했는데 먼저 집에 내가 대화 기쇼를 최소를 써야 돼 대화를 해요 말이야 교회 동아리라고 하자고
So normally we say that we happen to be born in the peak of the existence. We say that it's the highest happiness from the prospect of samsara. We say that from the point of samsara, it's the highest tip. So we say that those who happen to be born in the peak of the existence, we consider that it's the highest happiness, but it's not a happiness. It's also suffering because those beings who happen to be born in that kind of, peak of the existence, and they have a suffering of change, and also they have this kind of suffering, a pervasive compositional suffering, they used to have, because their happiness is not eternal, not permanent. They will change. That's why they used to have a suffering of change.
So 대화이나 뭐 잡초신 쓰고 말아. 그 동의에 따라서는 스웨 대화 잡초신. 그 동의에 따라서는
So that's why we say that the happiness enjoyed by those who are in the peak of the existence, we say that this is suffering because that is not a permanent. Once it's not a permanence and it's changed, it's like impermanent. It's not a permanent, which means it's an impermanent. Impermanent change. And the happiness which you enjoy by themselves is not eternal. Because once they finish their karma, they have to collapse down. That's why we say that it's a suffering.
나 집에 대화를 잡초지 대배 내란 더 봐야지 집에 대화를 잡초지 아니면 답 내고 기본 기출은 선거에 대해 dengue 중요해 기본 dengue 중요 등래야 그냥 dengue 좀 funktiona
and this like middle school person they have like like a and it has three different kinds. Middle school, the greater middle school, the middle school of middle school, and the middle school of the like a, it has its own three divisions. 딩이치워.
다들 뭐자 집에 대화를 잡초지 좀 내고 기본 기출은 대배를 더 봐서는 그 상견들을 단 dengue 중요세 다 되네 대신마다 소주도 된다 나중에 공부돼서 다 dengue 아니야 다음에 공부돼서 dengue 침보스 다 들어 지난 직선한 님들이랑 연결을 니어를 남다 니들이랑 연결해서 남니 열와 티바잖아 티바 멤버라 팀mel라 님들이랑 이제 팀mel라 이제 님들이 봐서 연사 다 티바론도 전에 라면도 동가자 님들이랑 이제 팀mel이라고 봐대 손 들려야도 중원들 티바 도와서 진행들 메다서 주도다 되는 나중에 세네된 진짜 치고들 다음에 공부해서 다음에 봐도 공부해 나와서는 생기도 땡기다 전부스를 하는 거.
So this like a middle school person we can be divided into three parts. Greater middle school
상상пон이었어요.
아,
상상пон이었어요.
Geshe would like to go and to lighten himself. Hello. So this middle scope has like three different kinds of middle scopes: greater middle scope, and lesser middle scopes. So those like lesser middle scopes, the aim of the lesser middle scopes used to do that. They just detach the happiness from the ordinary being to the big of existence. They just think that this is just a suffering. That's like concerning from the lesser middle scope. So the middle scope, what they do, they always engage to practice in, you can say, in the law of dependent originations. And the greater middle scope used to engage in practice selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. These are the like a different practices and from the, you can say, middle scope person, according to the difference of the middle scope. There are three different kinds of middle scope. They have their own each destiny and each practices. And from the vehicle point of view, we say there are two different kinds of vehicles: Mahayana vehicle and Hinayana vehicle. So from the vehicle point of view, and the practice of the middle scope, we say that it's like Hinayana. I mean, there are three different kinds of middle scope, greater middle scope, and lesser middle scope. So middle scope itself is a practice of Hinayana, we say that. From the vehicle point of view, or vehicle, I don't know. No. Be friendly. No need to study. I just meant to light it myself.
난다 집에 디벨한테 같이 있어 집에 대화들하면 다 동해 그래 집에 대화를 안 하는 개반 주지고 동해는 누르고 그래서 집에 대화서야 되고 집에 대화서는 지난 동해는 동해 숨어를 봐 동해기 동해 다 말은 되게 유해 동해를 봐 유해 동해
집에 유해 동해
네네네 다 동해기 동해는 유해 동해일이야 내 존재가 싫어 봐요 그랬어.
So, like there are three different kinds of suffering: suffering of change, and suffering of suffering, and pervasive complication of suffering. So, to the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, and there are some Buddhists, there are some non-Buddhist. There are some, you can say, schools which are other than Buddhist, and they do get, they do generate a renunciation to overcome these two, suffering of suffering and suffering of pain.
당연한 처반 두시고 동해서 그래. 처반 두시고 동해를 야하는 인종 공부도 다 지난 남바에 체조를 시작을 했어.
So, in terms of, you can say, the suffering of pervasive composition, suffering of pervasive composition or pervasive composition of suffering, and it is like one you can say unique practice from the Buddhist point of view, and there are so many Buddhists that who practice on that kind of sufferings because it's very much unique to non-Buddhists.
처반 두시고 동해서 해야 돼. 그런 교회 동해이 말해.
The pervasive composition of suffering is very different from the suffering of pain and suffering of suffering.
이네 동해는 샤워 그래서 그 레니오고 샤워하지 라와메바 내발라 라와메바 그랬어.
Because of why we included the pervasive composition of suffering, included in the suffering, because it is also dependent on karma and delusion.
인상 꼭 내발라 라와메바지 인도산 들으니 라와메바지 소원연사 그래야 처반 두시고 동해서 이네 처반 두시고 켜봐다 두시스는데 과셔줘 켜봐다 이도치에다 동네에서 가셔줘 처반 두시고 동네에서 켜봐다 도치에서 지금은 아주 고야 공부들 고야 루딘 들려야 지지단 처반 두시고 동네 천시로 전화를 받들 그 차와서 말아봐 지금은 아주 고야 공부들 처반 두시고 동네를 받들 그 켜봐 가면서 다 처반 두시고 동네에서 고야 공부 탐색을 봐 차와야 켜서는 맞아 고야 루딘 대때라야 두시 교회 동네 당 동네 어떻게 넣어보시고 교회 동네 때인지 당당히 마음발이야는 동네 발하바지야 때인지 당당함에 동네 사시라 냥야가 때인지 두시스 뭘 당당히 마음발이야 때 동네 마고 녀야가 주사야가 때인지 땐 두시 뭘 사시가 근데 동네 냥야도 단대 녀와 집에 때인지 아니 고발된 탐절을 봐 차번냐가 나와면 차번인자 차봐 도시 동나와 인들 연유기 시험하지 인자 동나와 왔어.
So why we you can say consider the pervasive composition of suffering as inside the suffering, actually it's not very much related to the suffering of suffering and the suffering of pain, because it's very subtle. It's very subtle, and it's not a concrete of that too. Because, like, there are different kind of interpretation about, like we have a different explanation about why it's pervasive and why it is compositional. Because it is compositional because it's unable to resist on its identity, and is unable to keep on its identity. That's why it's compositional. Or why it's pervasive? Because it's pervasive that, and it is pervasive that it was pervaded by, you could say, these two, suffering was pain and suffering of pain and suffering of suffering, act as, you can say, an object which influence the, you can say, you can say, suffering, pervasive composition suffering. So that's why we say that it is pervaded by, compositional suffering is, pervaded by, from the compositional suffering is pervaded from the prospect of object by, you can say, like suffering of suffering and the suffering of pain. So that's why we consider it as it also included in the suffering. You can take you can give the example. For example, you can say the aggregate that we have is just, very from the grosser level point of view, and we also say that this is also pervasive compositional suffering. The aggregate that we have is a very gross level example to understand, or you can say, pervasive compositional suffering.
먼저 저도 이거 등은 다 검토요. 검토나 그 걸려서 내가 등은 기부시야다 단다 기부도 생각을 쓴게 되는 영향이야 말이야. 나도 제가 두지 된다 검토요. 뭐야 신기야 말이야. 저번 두지로 저번 두지 그 동안 검시나 걸려서 자주하다 기부도야 되는 거 거를 되는 야 멤버만 나시 카바스만 되반 나시 전에 원래 멤버션에 표시는 매마정이 좀 검토해진 거. 때문에 그래서 먼저 제가 두지 동안 멋있는 거다.
From in the very moment, we are unable to meditate, we are unable to know, or we are unable to understand what is pervasive composition of suffering. So that's why we are here. If we are able to understand or to meditate on the pervasive composition of suffering, then in a fraction of a second, and we never give up the opportunity, like fraction of second, to practice on pervasive composition of suffering. Because once you realize the pervasive composition of suffering, and you will know that, and this samsara is something like big ball of fire. So nobody wants to be sit on the big ball of fire, because it's definite that you will just finish. So once you understand the pervasive composition of suffering, and then you will understand that this whole samsara is like a big ball of fire.
考虑的是写大学，找到考虑的我的写大学了，爸子，你让这些爸子考虑的写大学了，那上个不懂的那些，看不怎么对吧？那些事呢？这考虑一年学一年了，东半年人家把小嘛，到这个马啥到个考虑的啥到个考虑一年尽量的，考个怎么了？对吧？那有没有？这先给的爸爸那么说，我这基本上其他东西基本考拉上了，基本爬出强的基本东啊，所以考虑东西的那种。
So it's a clear logic and it's a clear symbol that because we really don't have a total understanding of pervasive composition of suffering. So whenever we just open our eye, we think that, oh, it's beautiful. We attach to that, and you say, oh, it's so nice, because you are unable to understand the pervasive composition of suffering. So those Arya and those noble beings, and Arya and noble beings, and they consider that even the human form, they really get frightened when they just, by hearing the human form, human is full of suffering. Just say that. These really are full of suffering. So that's why an Arya and noble beings and used to say that, and they says that there is no happiness. Whatever and whenever, there is no happiness in this samsara. And this samsara is something like a tip of needle. Like when needle is too sharp, and the suffering of the samsara is something like that. So that's why the whole samsara, like samsara is something like a own tip of the needles. So you are unable to walk on the tip of needles. It's too sharp, it's stuck up. So there's no way and no chance to have some kind of happiness from such a samsara, which is something like that. They always used to say that.
So 저번에 동안 가는 거는 그런 지고 본발하면 다들 반 심벨 때문에 다 저번도 지고 동인 거 봐. 제가 가도 인생 가도 있는 사회사만 매가서 미야만 매가서 인생 가도 있는 지고 본발하면 다 매버 범도 거 인생 가도 있는.
So why there happen to be arise a pervasive composition of suffering? Because of that attached to I, ego. So once you are able to meditate on equalness, not equalness. So once you are able to meditate on the non-existence of I, then from that very point onward, from that very moment, you will be able to understand the pervasive composition of suffering. So it's very much important for us to practice the non-existence of I, selflessness. Yeah.
더 파고들고 파고 동에 지금 건너들 채로 넘어라. 동에 자신이 병원에 배 하고 하지. 인생가 뒤에 다 놓음도. 다도 주변 라이즈는 지고 보면 다도 주변 젠두자 동에도 연구하고 틀어 다시 가두이네라는 것 지고 보면 다음에 어쩌냐 검되는 거다. 검도주자 하는 거 저번도 지고 동에도 막 열심히 지진 저번도 지고 동에 무슨 지진을 냐바샤 세야되는 배 원래 메션에 표시를 내가 좀 콘도다 냐바샤 때가 인자 뭐부터 냐바샤 때가 인자 그래서 콘도다 거기 동에지라시 맞을 배 탈지 맞차 롱아지 좀 지어 나는 이로 코알은 좀 살롱아 매자네 가도 있는 기보다 신보다 시에 가보다 이제 연결하고 어떻게
So those Arya beings, like every now and then, they, continuously, they meditate on selflessness. Like they say that the form that we have, even though they happen to be, you can say, burn a fire on your head, they didn't care. They say there's no self, it's selflessness. And their meditation is really continuity and it's really pinpointed. And they are, able to understand the nature of the pervasive composition of suffering. But in terms of us, we are unable to understand, unable to meditate on the pervasive composition of suffering. That's why we always found, oh, it's a delicious food. Wow. Oh, it's a beautiful dress. Oh, it's swimming. We say that. Because of our grasping. That grasping, and we are always linking here and there. So that's why we say that we are unable to understand the real factor of pervasive composition of suffering.
제가다 인생 내가 가지는 저번 주 동안에 시바 연사 다음에 공도상에 등에서 라바시로 라바 숨기냐면 가지는 라숨냐면 공공하게 걸어.
So that's why those Aryas, by hearing the name of samsara, they really get scared, really get frightened. So that's why day and night, there's no difference in the day and night. They always keep on practicing on this selflessness. So through this way, they can understand, understand the reality of the samsara. And for us, is it possible for us to do these kind of things? I don't know. Maybe it may not be. There's a more possibility of chance that it may not. So that's why we have to try to generate a renunciation in within us to think the way we are is something like that.
다 내고 내가 semua 인상한테 라면심을 동안에 지하다 주다 먹고 건너서 담아 동안 숨는 것도 동네만 먹고 와대 동네랑 신이 바토나 거와 동네랑 신이 바토나 거라 탄도 올라지 되는 거라 탄도 올라지 봐 인상은 거라 잡았다는 말이고 봉되지 The Tanzi Mariba Bond, Tanzi, ten Tano from Duki, Nakatu Tano from Bayensa, and Lavasun in the ten.
So that's why it's very important to understand the sufferings. Actually, actually, if we try to go deeply into each part of suffering, there are 106 different kinds of sufferings. So when we categorize these 106 sufferings, we are able to categorize in 3 sufferings.
Oh, so you know what?
So we are able to categorize in different kinds of sufferings. So how these sufferings, like when we are able to understand these sufferings, and then we will able to understand the grasping at object as truly existent. Because of that understanding, and we are unable to understand the reality of that fact. Once we are able to understand that is a grasping, so then we can meditate on the selflessness. Once you are able to meditate on the selflessness, you understand, and then it's no longer to reach the final destination, that is enlightenment.
What is that? The teaming it out. The Yamsalanga Juma, that and you are what Alabarasal, that teaming Yamsalanga Mapoyarava. So, Konchok that time of Gentleta Comia that Tisanyam into the Thorn Tirawa.
So, nowadays, Universal Vehicle and Theravada, the main practice on selflessness. So they always engage in practice on or meditation on selflessness.
Carson Tadon Zina, Tayabas, Tayabayanza, Talayana, see, Tala Tebe, Penton Vajra, Dojase. Tala Tebe, no Yanashia answered, and the Tataji, Majaji. And then Telatin Lessa, and a question we are, which has any time of Comati, wouldn't have.
So therefore, it's very important to meditate on the selflessness, because if you meditate on the self, you can say there is a self, and you will get the attachment. Once you get the attachment, and there comes a hatred, anger, and so forth. So once all those things, if you consider there's a self, to merely just considering the existence of self, and you get attachment. Once you get the attachment, which means that you are attached, there comes hatred, anger, and everything. So once you grow out all those things, which means you're lingering in the samsara. So that's why, and they found that it's more technical and more important to meditate on the selflessness. So that's what they do, meditate on selflessness.
Santa Dada was the most demotion. Demotion of Jombais. Demo to Jomtona, the Zashadan, I took on some Jomdo. What can you order about? Madam Mother and Mabon got a Jomishan on Jomdo, and I said, Demotion of Jombais. Demo to Jonathan, Nejay, not Nazajay, and Yambo time out of a shirt mentored. So Dada depends invited Nejay in Ayave. Nerish gets a to another Nerish gets a juice. Nerish gets a juice in the day. Element as a Zawashi down until any Jashi Yarma. Gets a Zawashi.
That's all.
Zawashi desire and Timo Tisum Dubara tenant, Tisum Tene, Desire and Timo Tusum Chanyamara Tene, Zawashi. Telajane ten Shige Yorma. What the Korean Samata Yudua, what's ever in that Timo Zuna did Naza the Zawashi, the Chom Savayanda, Shige the Chomsa.
So the grasping at object as truly existence. So once you have this kind of grasping, so what is the cause to arise? The grasping at the object as truly existence is because of ignorance. So once you are able to cut up or cut down the ignorant, and which means that you are able to cut down all the root of samsara, which means you are no more existing any kind of grasping. If there's no grasping, there's no existence of self-existence, which means becomes selflessness. So likewise, we're going to take the example of sickness. From the Buddhist point of view, we say that there are 424 different kinds of disease. And once you can categorize these diseases into three: phylum, wind, and bile. So, what are the causes of these three principles of disease? You can go back to three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and anger. So, that's why the Buddhist philosophy and the medicines, the Tibetan medicines, are really equivalent. So that's why we said that all those diseases are also come from ignorance. Once you are able to cut down the ignorance, which means you have no disease. Which means that once you have no ignorance, right,